Welcome back to the Valley of the Suns podcast. I'm your host, Kory Miller. Joining me today is a special guest, current Phoenix area newspaper editor and former Suns beat writer, Nick Smith. Nick, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
In this episode, we're going to take a little look at the Suns trade machine ideas as we approach the deadline. We're also going to look at some of the free agents to be from the summer of 2017 that the Suns might make a run at. Nick, the trade deadline is in less than a month, and the Suns look to be active shoppers, with many players on their roster rumored in deals. Who do you think is the one player on the Suns roster right now that is surely to be dealt by the deadline?
The problem is there's a lot of people that could be dealt, but there's no one guy for sure that's your go-to. I mean, you would think it would be Brandon Knight just because the Suns want to get rid of him so badly, but
you would hope.
Yeah, but
the thing is, all hope.
This season it feels like he's just sort of sank his trade value. I mean, who is coming to the table for Brandon Knight?
Someone, I hope. I mean, Philadelphia and Sacramento have been rumored, but I've written a column actually twice on the website about Brandon Knight. He is very close.
You're a big fan.
That's to put it mildly. He has the worst plus-minus in the league of any guard right now, I believe. Earlier in the season, it was of any player, period, so he is moving up. If you watch him play during the games, he's a black hole in offense. He's a shooting guard in a point guard's body, and he doesn't have a lot of flow. He's not able to run an offense, and he's too streaky of a shooter to play as a sixth man. And I honestly don't know what his trade value is. If you look at Philadelphia on the trade machine, one trade I did come up with was Brandon Knight for Jahlil Okafor, and I know that we've talked about that before. I think even on this podcast, definitely on the Valley of the Sun site. What do you think about that? Because off the top of your head, you would think that Okafor is maybe too much to get back for Knight, but Okafor has really struggled these past couple months with Embiid breaking out so much, and actually has only played in something like 4 of their last 10 games. And so I'm wondering if a change of scenery for both players would do them well.
I think so, but I think you'd probably have to give up a little more if you were the Suns for that, just because there's value and potential, and Jahlil Okafor was a high pick at one point. But if there's a time to get him, it probably is right now while Embiid is just busting out and having an awesome year. Because what if he gets hurt in 3 weeks? Then Okafor's off the table. Like, this is your shot to get him right now. And if I was the Suns, I'd probably want to do it because the goal for this season shouldn't be winning a bunch of games. It should be trying to get a good draft pick. That's sort of where you are right now. And Brandon Knight doesn't do anything for the long-term future of this team. So I'm willing to take the gamble on someone like Okafor.
I think dealing Knight is really addition by subtraction because I really just don't think he works with this team. I don't know if he works for a team in the NBA, period. He's such an odd skill set.
People have enough questions about Bledsoe working with Booker going forward into the future. Knight has a similar skill set, but he's not nearly as good. So it's just a no-brainer. He doesn't fit.
Oh, I mean, at this point, if the Suns can get anything for him, I'm in favor of trading Knight. I've kind of said that. I almost want to give him away because I do think the Suns are a better team without him. The reason I think that I'd be ecstatic to get Okafor back is even if he's had an awful year, I understand he's really, really bad on defense, and that doesn't mix with Devin Booker, who's also really, really bad on defense. But he's young and he has potential, and he's skilled offensively in the post, which honestly, especially at power forward, we don't have any of that right now. Tyson's had a great year, but Tyson's never been an offensive player in the post. And so that would still be a skill set that the Suns lack. And even if it doesn't work out, again, I think just getting rid of Knight is addition by subtraction.
I don't think you have to sell the Suns part of this, though, is the thing. Because Okafor is, I mean, he was a high draft pick. He hasn't even been in the league 3 years. So, yeah, things are kind of dicey right now, but there's so much potential there. The thing is getting Philly to give up on him.
Yeah, and I think that for a player like Knight, they might, because as odd as it sounds, I think Philly is one of the places where Knight could do really well because they really don't have established guards there.
And what's bizarre is Philly isn't tanking, which is hard for us to comprehend because
they've
been tanking this whole decade.
They might actually make the playoffs.
Exactly.
It's insane. They're playing great basketball as of late. And adding a player like Brandon Knight, he could go and start in Philly. He can play 30 to 35 minutes a game. And I think he would actually kind of work with them because they have a lot of front court talent and they don't have a lot in the back court.
Right. Someone's got to go because obviously Embiid, if he doesn't get hurt, is going to be a franchise player. But they've got Nerlens Noel there too. I mean, something has to give with that group.
They haven't seen Ben Simmons yet, but they're supposed to get him back maybe even possibly sometime this season. If you actually give them a guard, they could conceivably make the playoffs.
I mean, what would you throw in there if you were the Suns, though, to sweeten that deal if you had to? A pick? Would you do it?
I don't know if I could bring myself to do that because I think picks are just too valuable, and I don't think Okafor is valuable enough for a pick. I think Knight for Okafor is kind of a fair deal. If I was absolutely forced to give a pick, it definitely wouldn't be a lottery pick. It would have lottery protection on it, and maybe try and give a package of maybe a 1 or 2 second rounders just to kind of throw at them.
Well, the trade is successful on the trade machine, so just screenshot that and send it to Philly's front office.
Yeah, too bad Sam Hinkie isn't there. He definitely would have done it.
So Sam Hinkie, how mad is he right now? What if they win the title in 5 to 6 years? Is he Mark Jackson level angry? Just resentful forever?
Maybe, but Mark Jackson's at least able to still like work in the building every once in a while, so
that's almost worse. I feel terrible when he does those games. It's like muttering to himself in the corner. So this is going to sound crazy. We talked about trading Brandon Knight, but you have brought up the idea of going totally nuclear and getting rid of Eric Bledsoe. Why would you do that?
Well, and it sounds even crazier with the way he's been playing recently because he's been playing at an all-star level. He's been awesome the past couple of weeks. I'm still not sold on a ball-centric, scoring-first guard like Eric Bledsoe running an offense with Devin Booker in it. And I think Booker is who the Suns have to build around because I've said it, I wrote a piece about it, I take a lot of flack for it, there's a lot of hyperbole in it, but I think Booker's a superstar. He's an inconsistent superstar right now, but he's turned a corner in January, and it mirrors kind of a turn he had last season, and I think you'll see next season, I think you'll see him in All-NBA and All-Star discussions.
This is the closest the Suns have had to a franchise player this decade.
And he's their best draft pick since Amare. I mean, hands down, without a doubt. And he's who you have to build around, and he's an off-the-ball player. He's able to drive and create his own shot at points, but that's really not his game. And Bledsoe just isn't a natural point guard. Bledsoe's one of those combo guards, and they both play independently very well when they're on the court. But I think that if you paired a natural point guard like Lonzo Ball, who I really hope the Suns are able to get in the draft, and unless they end up with a first pick or 2, that's probably not going to happen. But my dream scenario for the Suns would be to trade Bledsoe for a really solid front court piece and a pick, and maybe an additional piece with how well he's been playing recently and what his contract looks like for the next couple of years. And then hopefully you luck out in the lottery and get a top 2 pick and you're able to grab Lonzo Ball in the draft. I think if you do that, you're looking at the makings of a potential dynasty in the making because Lonzo Ball, by all accounts, is going to be the next Jason Kidd. And I think that's a perfect type of guard that you want to pair with Booker. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I don't know about that, but what I would say is I do agree in the sense that it seems crazy to trade him because of how good he has been playing.
It does.
But the thing is, it's all about timing.
Yep.
And if you look at Devin Booker's contract, it's like you are paying him so little over the next few years. The goal of the next few years before he gets this big deal should be to form this team, to mold this team around Booker as your at least second best guy.
Yep.
Probably first best guy. And Bledsoe's trade value is never going to be higher than it is right now because he can be the second best player on a championship team, I think.
Exactly. And the argument to not trade Bledsoe right now is also the argument to trade him. And that is he's playing out of his mind right now, and his value is not going to be higher, as you stated.
And for keeping him, like, what are you doing? So, yeah, he's playing awesome for a team that's not going to make the playoffs. It's a waste. I mean, trade him while there's still contenders that really have a desire for someone like Bledsoe, and get stuff back where you can start to build this team around Booker for the future.
Well, and another point that should be made about the value of Bledsoe is you're in a bit of a unique situation with the current CBA and the new CBA coming into effect, where Bledsoe is on a remarkably cheap deal, relatively speaking, to what he probably would get in the open market right now. And he's going to have 2 more years after this season at about $14 million apiece.
Right.
And on the open market, he'd probably command 25, maybe closer to 30
Stuff
with the way
is
he's
crazy
been playing.
right now.
And by the time his contract expires, that's when Booker's going to start coming to his own, start coming to his prime. And that's probably about the time you're looking for this team to be competitive in the playoffs. And at that point, are you going to go out and pay Eric Bledsoe? Because if the answer is no, then you should trade him now because his value is never going to be higher. It's a combination of how well he's playing, where we're at in the season, with so many teams still alive in both playoff races, especially in the West, when almost every team is still alive for that 8th seed, and what his contract looks like for a couple more years.
The hard part is having someone this good and feeling like you're actually getting value that's worth it back on a trade. Because it's hard when you're trading for the future and you're like, this is a lot of unknowns for someone who's really good. You feel like you should get a lot back for Bledsoe.
Yep. I bet Sam Hinkie would trade him.
And you dialed up something on the trade machine for Bledsoe. So let's talk about Minnesota. This is where we're going for this trade. It's been kind of a disappointment, and I don't know if it should be because I think it takes a while for young players to all gel together, which is what this team is. But I feel like because the young players are so good, expectations are high, and they haven't met them this season. So they could be willing to shake things up.
I agree, and Minnesota's a perfect team to trade with because they're alive in that playoff race. They have tons of young talent. Nick, what do you think about trading Eric Bledsoe for Chris Dunn and a top 5 protected first-round pick in the next couple of years?
Here's the thing.
Is that completely crazy?
It's not completely crazy because I like Chris Dunn. However, this is what I'm talking about with getting value for Eric Bledsoe. Like when I'm just staring at this, I'm like, I like Chris Dunn, and he has a lot of potential. And like you talked about, he's that kind of point guard that you want to pair with Booker.
He's a more natural point guard. He's going to move the ball. He's a pass-first guard, but he can still score. So he's between Alonzo Ball and a Bledsoe, I think. But I think he's a much better fit with Booker.
Totally. But then you look at the screen and you're like, good God, Eric Bledsoe for Chris Dunn.
Well,
am I crazy?
You'd also get a pick, and you put some protection on it, not lottery protected.
Chris
but
Dunn is still a question mark too, is the thing.
He is, but at the same time, if you keep Bledsoe and you're the Suns, what is the best case scenario you're looking at for the next 2 or 3 years?
Well, I'm not saying keep him. I'm just saying I think Minnesota would do this. I mean, I just think they would. But can you imagine if Bledsoe was on that team with Wiggins and Towns? I think they take a real leap.
Do you think there's any way Minnesota throws in 2 first-round picks with Dunn? Does that make it worth it for Phoenix?
Yeah.
I mean, at what level do you think this is worth it for Phoenix to take the risk? Chris Dunn is a question mark. He's probably the best pure point guard to come out over the last couple of years. He's still, I mean, he's a rookie. He's a few years away, but the Suns are a few years away. And by the time the Suns are ready to contend, Bledsoe's going to be due for a new contract. And he's going to want another max deal. And he's going to be 29 years old. And if he's able to stay healthy by then, he's going to command $30 to $35 million a year. And if you're the Suns, I don't know if you commit that to a 29-year-old guard who's in the middle to end of his prime.
No, because this is his peak, and I think people look at Booker and think, okay, so some of it is a question mark, but his peak should be more than this. He should be someone who we can build a real like contender around, which isn't going to happen with Bledsoe. This kind of is as good as it gets. So you get rid of him while the value works.
And I think as any Suns fan, I want the Suns to make the playoffs. I want them to be successful now. I'm tired of not seeing them play playoff games. But at the same time, we're in such a unique situation with Booker to where he is so good and he's only 20 years old.
Right.
He can't even buy a beer yet. And so that gives us plenty of time in dealing some of these assets for really good young talent. If we're awful for a couple more years, it's going to be really hard. But you have to look at Philadelphia. They've been the laughingstock of the league for 4 or 5 years now, and it's starting to pay off. And they look really promising moving forward.
Right.
You haven't even seen Ben Simmons play. I mean, they may make the playoffs this year. They weren't even supposed to be ready yet.
It just makes you take a deep breath because you're not trading star for star. So you're not like, okay, Eric Bledsoe's really good, but I'm getting this known commodity back. I'm getting a lot of question marks. And I think that's just hard for people. Like, that's the roll of the dice you take when you try to rebuild. It's a lot of it is just off of potential.
Yep. Well, before we move on to talking about someone other than Bledsoe, let me bring up one more location I possibly found for him in the trade machine. The Dallas Mavericks. They're towards the bottom of the Western Conference, but Nick, in your opinion, do you think they're trying to tank? Or with Dirk in the last twilight of his career, and because they're still very much alive in the playoff race, would they trade someone like maybe Harrison Barnes for Bledsoe to try and catch that 8th seed and give Dirk one last run?
Here's the thing. I think Dirk might think that they should still try to play for one last run, but I just don't think this roster's good enough. And I think they should tank. I would not do this if I were Dallas. This is a deeper draft, and even if you get the 5 seed, or like, sorry, not the 5 seed, but if you get the 5 pick in the draft, that's still a pretty good player this year. If I was Dallas, I wouldn't mess around with something like that. And not for Harrison Barnes.
Let me throw one more trade at you for Dallas. What if Dallas got Bledsoe for Andrew Bogut, Justin Anderson, and their first-round pick non-protected this year?
The one benefit to that is
because
that Bogut isn't expiring.
It is, and if you're Dallas, you get Bledsoe for practically Justin Anderson and your pick. You don't hurt anything this year. He helps you this year. You make a playoff run. You might make the playoffs, but you lose your first-round pick this year. Is that worth it?
I'd rather do the Chris Dunn deal, honestly.
If you're Phoenix?
If I'm Phoenix and I have both of those in front of me, I would pull the trade. If we're including a pick in the Chris Dunn deal, I would probably do that.
I think I would too. And
Justin Anderson, I really like him. But I don't trust him as like someone who can be an actual piece.
The actual piece in that trade, I think, is definitely the first-round pick from Dallas. Because if they don't make the playoffs, it could be a top 5 pick with no protection. I don't
think they would give that, though. I don't think they would give a non-protected pick. We could move on from Bledsoe, though, and we can talk about someone who people have talked about trading for a long time, which is P.J. Tucker.
Oh, P.J. Tucker. You love him, you hate him. Actually, do you love him or hate him?
I'm very indifferent.
He's been a great defender, but he's an expiring contract. And I know he's a good veteran leader in the locker room, along with Tyson. But I think it's pretty clear he's not coming back next year. I've talked about this on the podcast earlier with Adam Maines. If you can even get a second-round pick for PJ, and that's all you can get, I think you deal him, because if you're the Suns, you're really not going anywhere this year. And even if a second-round pick seems like nothing, there are times when a second-round pick works out. Draymond Green, Manu Ginobili.
Yeah, I mean, it's just luck of the draw. But if you're a contending team, I think Tucker holds some interest as like an 8th guy off the bench. You know what I mean? Like an 8th man.
And he's a good enough defender where he's valuable in the playoffs.
Right, he's got experience.
So let me throw this one at you. What if the Suns were to move PJ Tucker to Oklahoma City for Cameron Payne, and they got a backup point guard from him that would allow Tyler Ulis to kind of develop in the D League for a season or two until he was ready?
In my mind, and I might be crazy, this seems like the most likely trade because it kind of works for either team. Oklahoma City isn't going to win anything this year, but they're, in that contention for the second round in the West.
They are, and with Westbrook, it's almost like they're not going to be Golden State because they only have Westbrook and a bunch of role players. But when you
have Westbrook, that fun with the NBA right now?
I know.
It's like, okay, there's only 2 teams that are going to get to the finals, and we already know what they are.
But I feel like if you're Oklahoma City, if you have Westbrook, there's always that somewhat small glimmer of hope that he just goes off for 5 games and wins you a series. I think against most teams, he's able to do that. Golden State's just too talented. But if you give up another player like PJ Tucker, he's valuable to a contending team.
He's helpful during a stretch run, right?
And he can hit a corner 3. He's a really good defender. He's valuable as a rent-a-player. And if you're Oklahoma City, if you're giving up a backup point guard who's never going to start because Westbrook's there anyways.
Exactly, right. That's the thing. The problem is if you're the Suns, you're not getting equal value there because I don't think Cameron Payne is anything but a backup point guard, so you still don't have that.
But if I'm the Suns and PJ's not coming back next year, which I don't think he is, you're getting a backup point guard who's still going to be under a rookie deal for 2 more years after this season. And that's one of the places where you really need someone who can at least be playable right now, because Ulis hasn't been playable recently. And the more I watch Ulis, the more I think he needs to spend a full season in the D League and develop more. So, in my mind, you're getting at least something where you would get nothing if he walks after this season.
And it doesn't affect the winning percentage of either team, according to the Trade Machine. So, no harm, no foul. Why do you like Lonzo Ball so much?
He's taken the college basketball world kind of by storm this year. He was always going to be a top 10 pick, but he's been so good this season. He's able to shoot. He moves the ball. He's a pass-first point guard. He's big for a guard. He's 6'6". He's drawn so many comparisons to Jason Kidd. And I think that's exactly who the Suns need. The Suns actually have some offensive weapons. With Booker and TJ Warren and maybe Bender or Chris really develops. And if you get a guard who's kind of like Nash, who can just kind of orchestrate the offense really well, I think it's going to make the team a lot better. Bledsoe's a great player, and it's not that I don't like him. I just don't know if he's the best fit on this team.
If you want a top 3 pick, though, I think you need to get rid of Bledsoe, because this is going to turn into a thing like last year where you're just going to fall back to the 5 pick, and like it's fine, but that top 3 pick is just so important.
Well, especially this year, because the draft really looks deep. If you're a top 2 pick, you're picking between Lonzo Ball and Markelle Fultz. Both are point guards. Fultz is more like Bledsoe, where he's a score-first point guard, but he looks like a franchise player, and so does Ball.
Even at 3, you can get Josh Jackson.
Yep. I mean, if you have a top 5 pick this year, you're probably getting a decent player. I don't know how many franchise players are in this draft. I think there's at least 2. But 3 through 5 still have all-star potential. I mean, it's the deepest draft I think we've had in a few years. Well, so let's skip forward a few months, past the trading deadline, past the draft, looking forward to July, and when free agency opens, the Suns should have plenty of cap space. Nick, if you're Phoenix, who are you realistically targeting at 12:01 on that first day of free agency?
There's some, middle, not like superstars, but decent players that I think, especially wing players, that you could target, like a Mirotic or a JJ Redick.
I like Mirotic.
And I don't think Redick will leave the Clippers. But here's a thought. We talked about Okafor. Why not Nerlens Noel? I mean, that could be potentially free, and it's the same thing that we talked about earlier. Embiid is broken out there. There's a log jam at center. Somebody's got to leave. And which would you rather have, Okafor or Noel? Because I think I'd rather have Noel.
If I'm being honest, Noel. But what I really love about that, and if the Suns were able to get him, and they'd have to offer him probably a max deal because he's a restricted free agent.
I don't know about that, though, because here's the one thing. He's coming off injuries and a really inconsistent start. I don't know if Nerlens Noel would command a max deal.
So, well, let's frame it this way. If Okafor is traded, I think we'd probably assume Philadelphia wants to go all in on Noel. But if Philadelphia keeps Okafor, do you think they risk not giving Noel the max to see if anyone else offers him?
Interesting.
If I'm Phoenix, I actually really like that, because you bring in Noel, and I think you probably have to offer him a max deal or very close to it. I think I might be willing to roll the dice.
I don't know about that.
Because he's a rim protector, and for another year or two, he gets to learn from Tyson Chandler, who he's having a great year this year, but he's in the very end of his career, but he's a great locker room guy, and he'd be a great mentor for a young rim protector like Noel. And having a young guy like that, especially someone who's as athletic as Noel is, I think would be a great fit. But I mean, if we're realistic, you're gonna have to pay him $25 million a year.
I'm having second thoughts on this all of a sudden.
Are you?
I'm bailing. The idea that just reeks to me of a bad contract. Like, you're paying max money to Nerlens Noel, who gets hurt next year and is just sitting on the bench for 2 seasons.
Well, so what if the Suns did something like this? Alex Len is a restricted free agent this year. He's likely
your favorite.
He's likely going to command 16 to 20. If the Suns gave Noel 25 and let Len walk,
I guess that's fine. Yeah, I'd rather have Noel. Thanks a lot, Mozgov, for this being a thing.
Yeah, I mean, Mozgov getting $16 million a year from the Lakers has really set what I think Len's value is, because I think Len is probably the same level, if not better, than Mozgov. And I'll be honest, I'd rather give Noel 25 a year and hope he stays healthy.
Well, he's got more talent than either of them.
Then give Len 20 a year.
Okay, so we're on a site looking at players who are free agents next year, and I think it just has to be noted that Derrick Rose's agent is B.J. Armstrong. B.J. Armstrong is an agent now?
Is that possibly the same B.J. Armstrong?
It's got to be, right?
Bulls?
B.J. Armstrong is an agent, and he's Derrick Rose's agent.
Could that really be?
What about Derrick Rose to the Suns?
No.
I'm totally kidding. Now, there's a player that you specifically brought up earlier that you would like to target for a max deal.
I would. I don't know if the Suns would be able to work it out, but I think he's a perfect player for the Suns and for this city. And that is Gordon Hayward. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent next season. He has a player option for next season, so he could be unrestricted this summer. Obviously, Utah can give him much more money. There's a lot of young talent in Utah that they have to plan for, and they're not a huge market team.
The hard part about Phoenix, though, is it's like, what is the draw here over Utah that would make up the difference in money? Because it's not a way bigger market, and is it really more talent?
I think it's a way bigger market than Salt Lake City is.
I mean, it's a bigger market, but it's not one of the
It's
ones
not
that
LA,
makes a
but
huge
at
difference.
the same time, I actually think a market like Phoenix, where it's big but not huge like LA or New York, Gordon Hayward, he played at Butler. He's been drafted and played with the Jazz his entire career. He's not a big market guy.
Does he want to take a step back, though, and have to rebuild a little bit with the Suns? I mean, it might take a year or two to be where he is today with the Jazz, because this Jazz team has been getting better and better, and now they're the 5 seed.
Hayward is, I think,
it's just a lot of money to like leave on the table
it
because of
would
the new
be,
CBA.
but I think, especially with the way Tyson's playing, he's having his best season since 2010 right now. He might not have more than a season left, but if he's able to give you one more season like this, and you add Hayward this summer, that's a playoff team. Bring this entire Suns team back. You add Hayward with all these young guys who are going to get better each and every year, especially Booker, maybe Bender or Chris make a big step in their second season. You could have a 5 or a 6 seed. I mean, that's a decent team moving forward.
For sure.
And Hayward's only 27. He's moving into his prime. You could have Booker and Hayward in their primes at the same time, and you'd still have a high pick this season to spend on someone.
I think Hayward is the pie in the sky, though, because that's a really good player. He's an all-star now. He's at his peak, and you're not getting anybody above him in terms of ranking free agents this offseason.
I don't know if anyone above him, you talk about Durant, Curry, Blake Griffin. I don't know if any of those are actually going to hit the open market. They might take a couple of calls, but they're staying home. They're not going anywhere.
I mean, if Blake leaves, he's going to a contender, though.
Yeah, right. If they do leave, it's not going to be the Suns. Hayward's pie in the sky, like you said. Very likely won't happen, but he's who I wish the Suns would be able to go get. But being more realistic, I think the Suns are probably going to look at a backup point guard if they haven't traded for one yet. And there's actually one restricted free agent at center I really kind of hope that they make a bit of a run at, and that's Kelly Olynyk from Boston. I don't know what his value is going to be because he's been decent but not great for the Celtics. But I really like the idea of having a stretch 5 who you can maybe play at the 4 and pair with Tyson Chandler. And I think he maybe fits this offense a little bit better than Len does. What are your thoughts on him?
I mean, it's fine. Like, that doesn't like make a huge difference to me. I just don't really want to pay Kelly Olynyk a ton of money.
How much do you think Olynyk would go for? He's probably in Len money. He's probably 16 to 20.
Right.
I think the problem is with the Mozgov deal and with other deals that were signed last summer, if you get anyone of value in the front court, you're paying probably 18 to 20 million a year for. That's just the nature of the league right now.
Right. Man, you're just like going down this list, and once you get to the like 50s, Robert Covington, Jeff Green, it's not exciting.
It's bad. I mean, there's big names at the front of the list, but the problem is, especially with the new CBA, I don't see many of these guys leaving, which makes the draft and draft picks even more valuable.
So if we finish this up, if you were going to do one move that we talked about, you're the GM now, what's the one you pull the trigger on? And I know you want it to be the Okafor one.
If I can get Knight for Okafor straight up, I probably pull the trigger on that, just because, as well documented, I think we definitely need to get rid of Knight. And Okafor has enough potential. I know he's awful on defense. He's got good low post offense. And, you pair Okafor with Tyson for a year. I think Tyson is really invaluable in the leadership and the mentorship he can bring to these young guys. So if you're able to pair Tyson with Okafor for a year? Does that change things? Does Tyson improve some of his defense when he works with him after practice? I think it's also the best move for the Suns just to get rid of Knight. So I think they're giving up the least amount, getting some potential, maintaining all of their assets moving forward. And if I was a GM, that's the one move I would definitely try and make.
Yeah, if you can get it straight up, I'd probably do the same thing. Because Brandon Knight doesn't mean anything. The thing with Bledsoe is maybe you want to do the Chris Dunn one, but it's just so hard to say goodbye for a question mark, you know? Whereas Brandon Knight, it's like, what am I even losing?
It is. And I mean, it's gotten a lot harder to say this recently with how well Bledsoe's playing, but as hard as it is, and trust me, Suns fans, it is. It kills me every season we don't make the playoffs. But by the time this team is ready to contend, which is probably still 2 seasons out, you're going to have to pay Bledsoe $25 to $30 million a year. Are you going to do that for a guard who's already halfway through his prime?
Yeah, he'll be on the downside.
If he's able to stay healthy until then. I mean, my thing is that he's so valuable right now. And again, looking at the success Philadelphia's having with trusting the process, I think you just continue to pile up assets, draft young talent, develop them, and see where you are in 2 years.
Suns fans should be considering themselves lucky because you could have someone really good like Eric Bledsoe and be wasting his prime here. But instead, you have someone like Eric Bledsoe, and yeah, the team isn't great, but you have the future in another player who's 20 years old right now. Yep. Like, you should be happy.
Absolutely. If you're the Suns, you got Devin Booker with the 13th pick of the 2015 draft. I mean, there's a lot of other GMs that are kicking themselves for not taking Booker earlier. What are some of the other names that went first before Booker? I mean, who else could we possibly have that could make it much worse?
Oh, Trey Lyles. You could have had him. Oh. You could have had Frank Kaminsky, which is the best.
And he was rumored with the Suns before that draft, too.
And Cameron Payne was right behind him. You could have had Cameron Payne for free. And then, funny enough, Jahlil Okafor right there.
At 3. Yep.
3 overall.
Yep. So,
but yeah, if you had to redraft this thing, I think you go Karl Anthony Towns 1, of course, Porzingis 2. Do you take Okafor or Russell above Booker right now? Probably not, right?
I don't think so. I honestly, I would take Booker 3rd.
Definitely would not take Russell over him.
No, there's no way you take Okafor over Booker. No way.
I think Booker's the 3rd best player in this draft right now.
Yep.
That's cool. It's like the Suns got the 3rd pick.
Yeah, and again, it's the best pick the Suns have had since Amore, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and this drought of missing the playoffs is going to end at some point. And like I've been saying all season, Suns fans have just got to trust the process.
And I'm going to finish with this thought. It would be really tough to trade someone as good as Eric Bledsoe right now, but I think people will regret it in 3 years if they hold on to him, and then we miss the opportunity to assemble real talent around Devin Booker when he starts to come into his prime.
I completely agree. I couldn't say it better. Nick, thanks for coming on the show today.
This was great. I'd love to come on again.
You.
Yeah,
a lot of fun. For all you listening out there, visit valleyofthesuns.com and read all of our pregame and postgame reviews, some of our opinion pieces, our analytics. There will be a lot more trade machine talk, I'm sure, as we approach the deadline here in the next few weeks. And as always, keep listening to the podcast. If you have any questions or comments, or if you think we're just flat crazy out of our minds, send us an email to votsuns@gmail.com and we'll read it on the air. Until next time, thanks for listening.